안녕하십니까. 서울 강남
Hello, I'm Bae Jung-in of the Seoul Gangnam Dental Clinic. Today, we're going to look at impression taking for the anterior implant prosthesis. Up to now, I talked a lot about digital technology, and today I will also explain using the digital technology or how digital technology can be used. So this will be 4 areas I'm going to talk about today. So first, basically, how is the implant prosthetics made? First, after it's delivered, you first take impression. So on the implant level, you take impression, and also on the abutment level. And then after taking impression, you manufacture things and then you deliver the finals. But on the anterior side, what are some of the additional considerations that needs to be made? Of course, aesthetics are something to be considered. I'm not an expert in this area, but I do find that patient satisfaction is most important thing. Of course, dentists might think we can do more, but if the patient is satisfied, then we finish. And more specifically, crown shape and shade needs to be created well, and also harmony with the surrounding gingiva is important, and that can be determined through emergency profile and also the gingiva margin level harmonization. And also, after creating a prosthesis, change in the gingiva margin and abutment shadow should be considered. With the change on the gingiva, it sort of tends to collapse, then there could be translucency. So you need to also be prepared for that. So to realize these goals, tools could be used. First, you need to communicate about the prosthesis with the patient and to give feedback to the technicians. Temporary needs to be fully tried in. And 3D emergency profile and gingiva margin level, depending on the running room of the prosthesis, there could be changes. And that is called as a gingiva molding. And to have gingiva molding, the running room area of the temporary, what goes through the gingiva area, needs to be revised. And then you observe the gingivas. And temporary use there needs to be taken out often, so rather than cement type, screw type is more convenient. Lastly, aesthetic abutment, if that is used in the final delivery and any changes in gingiva, like a margin level or about the abutment shadow, such negative impact can be minimized. In other words, in achieving these goals, this screw type temporary, delivering it and through various steps of revisions, like this. Patient is satisfied and gingiva molding. If you think it's sufficiently done, then you take impression or you have to scan it. And at that time, rather than conventional impression taking, you need more information. When you have temporary, if take it out, the gingiva shape can be changed. When temporary is inside, the shape of gingiva versus gingiva without temporary, the running room area needs to be taken for both cases. When we create the final abutment, the running room area's shape and form is different from temporary. It could be changed in the gingiva shape, and gingiva could also change after final is delivered. So you need to have sufficient time and do gingiva molding. So once the gingiva is stabilized, that temporary running room form needs to be referenced in creating final abutment. Hence, to include learning room rather than abutment level on implant level, impression is necessary. And in this model, if you see the learning room area, there is horizontal line. and that is impression coping line. And if you use impression coping, the running room created by pouring that in model, is external shape. Of course, that can change depending on the size of the coping. Then, the molded gingiva, to take impression or to scan, how can you do it? If you don't have to consider aesthetics, then general impression coping can be used, but still, you can really achieve aesthetic results if you're skilled. But temporary collapse or slumping, if you are taking temporary in and out, that is a possibility, and gingiva is not supported after temporary is taken out. So if you use material with viscosity, there could be some collapse, so you need to take more consideration. Hence, copy the temporary running area and create customized impression coping, and you scan with it or take impression with it, and you create model in the coping. Then the running room of the model will regenerate the temporary. That will be the ideal approach. These days, we do a lot of scans, and the scans, emergent profile option can be taken. So some say you are additionally doing the gingiva scan basically top, bottom, and occlusion, 3 steps. But if you turn on emergent profile, it becomes 4 steps. First, in the implant, without having anything, you scan the running room area, and then the scan body is attached, and then you scan it again. Then running room area is scanned already, but temporary has been removed. Hence, gingiva collapse, would it not happen? Compared to using impression coping, what has become better? Actually, the gingiva collapse or slumping, whether that happens, let's compare. With the digital technology, it's easy to compare through the superimpositions. So in the video, when you remove temporary and you attach scan body, let's compare everything. These 3 scans, it's not just erasing scan body, it's totally different scans. On the gingiva area, there is a totally different 3 scans. In number 11 and 21. So as you can see, you see 3 scanned, and when temporary or in or out, the external shape of gingiva is not that much changed with 11 or 21. But here, on the inside, not outside but inside, in the running room area, in other words, it's a bit differently shaped as temporary. It seems to be a bit pushed toward the inside. So temporary is created to be very straight, although this is not a desirable form, but it seems to be more collapsed toward inside rather than being straight. So when we design final abutment, scanned emergence gingiva profile and running room is considered, then rather than temporary, the running room area is smaller than temporary in final abutment. And if that is the final abutment, then the gingiva could be remodeled to be narrow. Then the molding that we did with temporary becomes useless. But in design, the existing temporary running room shape or form is superimposed and can be copied as is. Then it's same as using customized impression coping in the but thanks to help of digital technology. So of these various approaches, theoretically the most ideal is number 2, but with digital technology there could be compensation. So let's look at actual cases. So for this patient, in September 2020, she came in with a tooth fracture. So it's a ideal condition for aesthetic treatment, as there is no much damage on the alveolar bone side. So very next day, I did immediate loading after extraction. And I scanned with the scanned body, and then screw type temporary was created. As you can see, temporary running room area from the crown side to fixed to the top side, there's a bit of X curve. But if it, rather than having a soft S curve on the gingiva margin side, the buccal line angle area, in the gingiva margin area, the angle is more sharp, then root and crown can be a bit more separated, and when you deliver it looks more natural. So on the CT, on the buccal side, it's moved more palatally positioned, so there's sufficient buccal bone. And then placement was done in September, and about we did molded gingiva for 3 months and then scanned the area. Now we superimpose these two for comparison. It shows that gingiva scan and temporary, when it's attached, it's superimposed. And this scanned result, there is a time difference, a time difference of 3 months. So when temporary is delivered, that's right side image, and when we create temporary, so the gingiva right after surgery is the right side, and the left side is after 3 months. Final scanned when we deliver final abutment. So if you see this two, buccal volume, you see there was quite a change. Hence, the running room currently, from the inside of the running room, there is slumping and it was scanned as is. So rather than designing with this, if you look at this image, this indicates the slumping of gingiva. So you should not create this as a final. So this gray line, which is screw type temporary, and so that final abutment and crown should be referenced to adjusted or slightly changed. So screw type temporary running room needs to be reflected for the final model. Hence, in December, zirconia abutment was used, and I put it for now temporary. And then I got feedback from the patient. He wore it for 2 weeks, and then I did abutment scan, and there was final delivered in January, post 4 months later. But I did for number 11, but then number 21, there was a crack, so came into the clinic and the surgery was performed, and maybe I was a bit afraid of the failure, so I didn't go with immediate temporary, but used healing abutment. Like this buccal bone side, it was placed nicely, and for 3 months, I placed in February, and then for the next 3 months, healing abutment was worn. Then SQ was measured, and the screw type temporary was created, and started to do gingiva molding. And the molding, patient said was okay. So molding period was only about 1 or 2 weeks. Then final abutment was scanned in June 3rd and delivered on the 10th of June. And temporary was also used, and patients was quite satisfied. And the 15th abutment level was scanned, and June 24th final crown was delivered. And after delivery, as you can see in number 22, gingiva margin, compared to initial visit, there seems to be quite collapse. And even number 11, this seems to be a bit of a collapse compared to adjacent teeth. You see a bit of a recession, but number 22 is more collapsed. So after a few months later, this is from June, then again 5 months has passed, and we took this photo, and there's a number 11, there's a bit of stabilization, and number 22, margin level, is not really clear, and more recent photo. Number 11 seems by now margin level is same with the adjacent teeth, but number 22 still stabilized after seems to have stabilized after collapse. Hence, if you compare by timeline, came in September. And then for 17 months since then, you can see the changes in prosthesis as well as gingiva. So if you look at the time, number 11 and 22 follows about same timeline. Prosthesis delivered after 4 months. The difference will be immediate temporary was used for number 11. After extraction, temporary supports the gingiva as a root form. So it's as if there is it would have been as if there is no tooth loss period. So gingiva external shape by timeline you can compare with the 6 scans. So first for number 11 comparison, this 6 scans I superimposed that into one image. As you can see, there's a lot of scans, so it's a bit confusing, but still in the initial visit, of course the crown was fractured, so gingiva might have slumped, but in the initial visit big volume and gingiva margin is also on the lower side. Then immediate temporary was delivered. After extraction, there's no change in buccal bone, but margin has slightly gone down. And then 4 scans, not much of a changes. So POD 3 months to 15 months, gingiva shape is more or less the same. But of course, if you look at the gingiva margin or crown margin area, slightly there seems to be recovery, but buccal volume is about 0.5 millimeters of reduction. Means remodeling is using immediate temporary. It was done for 3 months and then it was a bit stabilized. Of course, it could be gingivitis, but it's stably maintained. And margin being lower, it's about 0.2, 0.3 compared to initial visit. Of course, initial visit due to crimping, gingiva might have gone down. Then, number 22, let's look at the superimposed changes in gingiva. We only superimposed 3 scans, and compared to initial visit, there's a significant recession by about 1.2 millimeter. And then after abutment level scan, the abutment has slightly gone up. The buccal bone side, a bit change of 0.2, so it's less change than number 11. So we don't really know reason why, but the delta value maybe number 11, which was thicker, might have been bigger. That could be what we could deduce. Of course, a patient for buccal bone, margin gingiva, he might be more sensitive about that. But the change between, or the difference between 11 and 22 is whether immediate temporary was or not, and gingiva molding period was it sufficient or not. And that could have resulted in change. Of course, you cannot talk in absolutes. Let's look at different patients. Extraction was done at another clinic, and in the initial visit, remodeling was more or less healed. At the day of surgery, rather than screw type, stock abutment was used for temporary, and after 3 months, in May of 2011, scanned, and in early June, he came not regularly. There, gingiva molding was done with the temporary, then didn't come back, but in September, so remodeling was somehow done there for 3 months. And so in September, the scan on the abutment side. The buccal bone was done well on the palatal side. And if you see the comparison on the right bottom, 5 scans seems to have been compared, but actually 4 scans were compared. At the day of surgery, we opened flap, and that gingiva, therefore, is not good for comparison. So we only compared 4 scans. Initial visit in February 9th, 2018 for number 11, compared to initial visit with using temporary and and using stock abutment, narrow stock abutment, and doing remodeling result in more volume increase. And since then, the volume increased volume with screw temporary, the buccal bone actually grew by more than 1 millimeter. Then, after 3 months, then using temporary, that 1 millimeter that has been increased, would it collapse? If the remodeling period is sufficient, if it takes it out, the external shape doesn't really change drastically. Of course, inside running room area, we have seen that it collapses. And number 21, stock abutment doesn't really result in many change, but with the screw type temporary, the buccal volume, here we can also observe increase. And also, the final abutment levels scanned in number 11 and 21 buccal volume is maintained. So, screw abutment resulting in, you see, to the final abutment from the gingiva perspective. So, temporary resulting in gingiva molding. So, increasing the buccal volume is possible, in other words. And when you remove temporary, the immediate external change is not much, but internal slumping could happen. And you should consider that in creating final abutment. That could be the conclusion we can draw from here. So, from initial visit to final, papilla might have been better. He came back after everything was remodeling, maybe. That's why. So, the first patient, number 11 and 22, and second patient, if you compare these two, then similar timeline, but for number 11, everything was done immediately, and number 22, I did implant placement, but temporary was delivered a bit later, and for number 11 and 21, the patient on the right side, from healed ridge, there was a delayed placement, and gingiva molding was also done in a delayed way. Conclusion is number 11 for these three comparison is the best. So when we treat number 11, the process we took aesthetically seems to have the best results. So that's what we can surmise. So if we talk in wider area and look at all the anterior implant procedure and what kind of options do we have for aesthetics. So when we place implant, when extraction socket is preserved, then immediate placement would be more favorable. And gingiva molding, customizable abutment or using tools for that would be more favorable, especially for the central incisors and canine, that's more so. But for lateral incisor and lower anterior side, ready-made abutment could be used. Using appropriate molding tool, the buccal volume can also increase. And the starting point of the molding would be, if possible, immediate after extraction, and molding period should be longer than possible, so it can have some time for stabilization. And customer impression coping is the best way, but if you can use CAD/CAM and scan it, then without using customized impression coping, you can reference the temporary running room. So copied running room can be referenced to select or design final abutment, and the abutment aesthetics can be preserved. So scan body scanning, compared to that, you reference there the screw abutment external shape. So in using impression coping, the model needs to scan again and digitalize. Then again, the temporary external shape can also taken into reference. Hence, whatever you scan or when you mold, screwed abutment external shape can always be, in other words, taken into consideration. So again, if we narrow it down to impression, gingiva sloping happens internally. And if you create abutment as is, it can become narrow. So to copy the temporary exterior form using the number 2 approach would be the principle, but with the help of digital technology, even using number 3 or 4 approach, the screw type can be taken into consideration in overall design. But if you want to do the digital approach, then without using customized impression coping, you can create gingiva mesh. So on the left side, the filled scan file, on the right side, the temporary. If you can, do plus minus, then we can call this a Boolean difference, and the right side results. In other words, inside temporary shape is cut. That type of scanned file, we can create one. Now, implant level impression or scan used for final abutment is what I talked about. But besides that, for the final crown to be delivered, abutment, if you take it in and out, that could impact gingiva margin. So abutment level scans or taking impression there would be best. The margin area or the to have the finishing good, if you put in code, then again it can impact the gingiva shape. So if possible, in the abutment level, rather than impression taking, I think scan can deliver more favorable results. So abutment level scan and the margin area, even if it's not really clear, if beforehand, if you had the abutment scan before it was delivered to the mouth, then abutment level scanned, that result can be superimposed like this or integrated like this. And margin sharply exposed abutment level scan can be additionally created. So lastly, let me give you a summary. Implant prosthetics procedure, basically, to take impression, you have to do implant level and abutment level. And for aesthetics of the anterior side, screw type temporary needs to be used for gingiva molding. And you have to reflect it in the final. Then molded gingiva's running room area to include that. This type of scanned way or impression taking way is possible. But above all, for the abutment, implant level scan, or even if you take impression on that level, lastly, abutment level needs to be used, and if possible, they say this is double scan method. You do once abutment level scan, and then abutment level scan separately without being in the mouth. That double scan method, and that would be the better option. And that would be the summary of today's lecture. So I hope that you learned a lot in terms of how to take impression on the anterior area. Thank you for your attention.
감사합니다.